Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Neil Haley Network's Stack Your Own Deck. And I'm the co host, Neil Haley, and I'm excited to welcome the program Larry Bradley. Larry, how are you? Episode 4. We got so much information out of episode 3. Looking forward to chat about episode 4. How are you?
Neil, I'm doing great. I'm very excited about today's program, too. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and today we're going to discuss the Mess Cleanse, and we are very excited to share their life-altering program. So, Larry, what is the Mess Cleanse, and why did you create it?
Neil, I'm super excited to share with the audience today and explain the Mess Cleanse. So, we have all heard of people doing a cleanse or detox for their physical body, and it makes a lot of sense, to remove the toxins from our physical selves. But when have you heard of someone doing a mess cleanse, a mental, emotional, spiritual self-cleanse? I call it a detox for the soul.
Truly.
Because all of us at one time or another have felt like our life is a mess or some part of our life was a mess. And the mess cleanse simply is designed to take the critical negative emotions that create the stress in our lives to a final conclusion. We're giving tools to equip everyone to fairly simply take all that negativity in our lives as it relates to people and circumstances, a bad boss, traffic jams, etc., and bring those things to a conclusion, putting them to bed once and for all, freeing us to live a happy, healthy life like we were designed to.
Absolutely. And you talk about what stress does. It causes your health to be poor, your relationships to have problems, everything in your life. If you're dealing with stress, how it affects the body, the mind, and the soul in so many ways.
Absolutely. In fact, there's kind of a misinterpretation around stress. So, if I may, let me define it. I play around with this idea of a stress cycle. It's kind of a chicken and egg conversation. Which comes first, stress or emotions? I'm emotional, so I get stressed, or I'm stressed, so I become emotional. Well, guess what? It doesn't matter because
Right.
either way, that stress is lethal. What people need to understand is that the negative emotions that we're going to talk about in the mess cleanse, they're the primary negative emotions that we're going to, let me say, purge, or I love the word resolve. We're going to resolve those. Again, as I said, freeing us to live the life we were designed to. But a lot of people believe that stress is something that is caused outside of ourselves. For example, my boss really stresses me out, or my spouse really, or my kids, or my parents, and so on and so on, or a circumstances, traffic jams. I get super stressed in traffic jams, people might say, or I get stressed when my flights are delayed or canceled or whatever. And the great news here is that the simple truth is, but most people don't realize this, is that we actually choose our stress level because stress is truly how we represent those people and events back to ourselves, how we represent our reality and our reaction to it. For example, two people in the same traffic jam, one could be stressed to the max, ready to road rage and ruin their lives potentially, and perhaps those of others, while another person saying, you know what, this is an awesome opportunity for me to just do some quiet meditating or to listen to a book on tape or take advantage of this time to rehearse the speech I'm going to be giving tomorrow. So it's all a matter of how we frame it. So it's our choice. And that news is fantastic news. When we understand and truly get that we choose our own stress level, we then have the power to eliminate or greatly minimize. I don't think you ever really eliminate stress entirely.
No, not at
And
all.
some stress is good for us, but you get to minimize it to a point that's very healthy.
See, Larry, that's something that is very interesting because stress level a lot of times can lead to specific things in your body based on your biochemistry, like high blood pressure, that ultimately you even, let's say if you have, here's a good health question. you have high blood pressure, but you're not stressed in the negative aspect. It's just based on how you're developed and stuff like that. That's the challenge, right? Because sometimes people that have less stressed jobs and or less stressed lives, which are really not taking any chances or dealing with any different things, have nothing wrong with them. They're healthy, but yet ultimately they're not happy. So there is a definite definition of good stress and bad stress, but sometimes good stress can cause health issues at times. So you have to monitor that, right? Would you agree with?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A wedding. A wedding's a wonderful, happy event. At least most of them are, but they're highly stressful. A new job, a promotion, a move to a new location. Those things are typically positive things, but they're highly stressful. So the key here is to understanding, what stress is doing. You talk about disease and stress. Our Centers for Disease Control, CDC, now tells us that the number one delivery system for disease in America is stress. Stress. So, how does that work? Well, you have chronic stress, you have acute stress. Acute stress is good for us, stress. For example, if you do a workout, you're stressing your body. That's acute stress. You stress yourself, you stop the workout, your body returns to normal, homeostasis, they call it. That's wonderful stress because that's designed to make you better and healthier. Uh, Back in the day when cave people walked the earth and the lion would appear looking to make the cave person their lunch or dinner, the body would go into fight or flight, and every bit of energy is reserved for either fighting or fleeing to stay alive. But again, that's acute stress. And if the cave person didn't become lunch or dinner, they return to homeostasis, and that stress actually saved their lives, that fight or flight. Now, fast forward to today, where the competition for our time and attention between our jobs, our people, our health, our wealth, our families, our problems, our devices, the competition for our time and attention is so fierce that people are many people are very stressed out and not knowing, what to do with themselves. They may have a bad boss, a bad spouse, a bad marriage, problems with the kids, problems with the parents, problems with health, problems with money. And by the way, money is the number one stress trigger in America today. But any and all of these things, you go into stress, so you're creating the stress hormone cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Those hormones are chronic now because we're not going to run away from a bad boss or necessarily a bad relationship or our health problems or our money problems. You can't run from this stuff, so it stays with us. It's chronic. So that chronic stress, those chronic hormones constantly pouring into our body, which in an acute fashion of stress are good for us, now become lethal because they're creating inflammation in the body. And that chronic inflammation over time is exactly what is creating the disease states, the high blood pressure, the chronic illness, the cancer, the heart disease, the dementia, all of Parkinson's, all of those things are coming out of chronic inflammation. And here's the thing. An inflamed mind, meaning a highly emotional, negatively emotional mind, an inflamed mind is an inflamed body. And when that body's inflamed, that body is going to get a disease, potentially destroying that body.
So, Larry, listening to you now and looking at I live a stressful life. We all live a stressful life. It's how we respond to it. We might be thinking we're doing the right thing. We might be thinking, okay, really, I'm dealing with this stress. It's not bothering me. I just keep rolling with the punches, move on to the next thing. But we're really not taking a mental note because ultimately, if we come back and find out, hey, there's some health issues, we're not taking
Absolutely.
a mental note. And really, that when I talked about from the beginning of the program, stress, good stress, can that cause high blood pressure? That question is probably no. Then there's something that in your brain, even though you're able to handle the result of the stress, you're not able to handle the lead up to that answer or that challenge or that waiting on something, right? You could identify in your mind, oh, I'm not stressed. I'm cool. I made it through. I knew everything would work out. But if you're stressed out throughout that whole time and you're stressing negative thoughts and emotions, that's what leads to the inflammation. And that is
Absolutely.
that's a great point, Larry. I never knew before that again, our brains can cause disease. Our brains can cause uh, all these terrible things in our bodies to go, not just mental health, but physical health, which is the most important thing next to mental health. I think they go hand in hand.
Absolutely. Mind body is intricately connected. You can't separate the two. And your point is a very good point. We're so busy, as I said, that the competition for our time and attention in this world we live in is so fierce that we're moving from item to item, good to bad to good to good to bad to bad throughout our life and throughout our day, never really taking a pause to check on. And most people are not very good at assessing their own stress level. Unless they're to the point where they can't take it anymore, then some bad things happen mentally and physically, like we're talking about disease or even worse, our own death. But a lot of people are going through the motions, never really taking a time out to check in on these emotions and the stress that they're creating. And that's why I created the mess cleanse is to slow people down in a process to give them tools that they can actually use to bring, as I say, and I love the word, bring these emotions as they relate to people in our life and circumstances in our life, bring them to a
Yes.
resolve.
All right.
Because an unexpressed emotion, here's the critical
Mhm.
thing, an unexpressed emotion, this is the audience has got to understand this and they will. An unexpressed emotion cannot die. So if the emotion doesn't die and it's negative, it sooner or later is going to cause a disease, and potentially, if it continues, it's sooner or later going to kill us.
And see, that's where I'm learning from this process because I thought, oh, I'm not very stressed. But then I start thinking about it. When it's in your mind and it's bothering you, it's stress. And
Oh,
if
yeah.
you're not thinking the positive that's going to work out, it's stress. It could be a positive stress is that, hey, you're going to have to put that extra physical time in. You might have to get a little less sleep. But if it really is that monkey on your back, you're in trouble. So let's go right to some questions because I could talk to you all day long just based on that specific topic of stress.
Absolutely.
We'll have to go back to that in one of our other podcasts for sure. You can see I kind of want to get in this
Yep.
conversation going. But what are the primary negative emotions the mess cleanse resolves?
Well, Neil, before we do that, and I'll answer that, but let me just say to punctuate your point and maybe really bring it home harder, and I've talked about this in prior episodes. In his book, The Biology of Belief, Dr. Bruce Lipton says there are three causes of disease. He calls them the three T's, letter T, the three T's of disease. They are trauma, toxins, and yes, thoughts. Thoughts are things, and what we focus on via our emotions, how we're representing that world back to ourselves and our reality back to ourselves, creates disease if it's the wrong stuff. So the emotions, back to your question, the primary negative emotions the mess cleanse deals with are disgust, anger, fear, and jealousy. Now, there's a lot of, excuse me, guilt, not jealousy, guilt. So anger, fear, guilt, and then on the top is disgust. They are the four primary. Underneath of those are many others, but once you learn the mess cleanse process, you can deal with any emotion as it relates to any person or situation in your life.
This is amazing. This is amazing stuff. I tell you right now, everyone listening, and I'm really working on this again, going back into the whole game of engaging people on radio. Everyone needs to jot down all this information. It's going to be available in many different forms at one point in time. But if you're listening to this show right now saying, am I dealing with any of these stressors? I will raise my hand and I would say, disgust happens to me sometimes, and I think the guilt of not being as good as I want to be would be two of those four I could identify for sure in this process so far. That hey, I never thought of this, and I never looked at my emotions and thoughts and feelings in that way, Larry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll tell you, to kind of counterintuitive as it relates to the first emotion, which is disgust, we tend to think of disgust as a negative emotion, and we frame it that way. But I'm going to kind of go counterintuitive on you here and say, I think that disgust is a powerful, positive emotion because when a human being becomes disgusted, I'll say sick and tired of being sick and tired of whatever it is that's got them stressing, they should get very excited because disgust is the emotion that's just one step away from that powerful positive change. When we get disgusted enough, we're going to make change. We're about to make
Definitely,
a
yes.
change to that thing that's causing that disgust. That's exciting to me.
I find it very exciting. For sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
so kind of to understand that, if I am using disgust in a good way, if I start having negative thoughts, I get disgusted. I'm thinking of those thoughts. Could that be something?
say that again, Neil. I'm sorry.
So if I go ahead and with disgust and I start thinking negative thoughts and I get disgusted by me thinking these negative thoughts and try to shut it off, that's using disgust in a good way.
Absolutely. And it actually has to do with pain pleasure. You'll hear Anthony Robbins talk about this a lot. The things that move us as human beings are pain and pleasure, and we will do a whole lot more to avoid pain. And disgust is painful. We'll do a lot more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. So the big primary mover, unfortunately, is negative, but fortunately, it's negative. So disgust is going to move you to make a change, which is powerful.
Absolutely. You got it for sure. And so you're saying these primary negative emotions are good things to clean up what our problems and our stress levels are? If I'm getting. Uh, yeah.
Absolutely. Listen, so we talked about disgust, but let's talk about anger, fear, and guilt. They are the primary negative emotions that almost every human being can relate to. So we put in play under the mess cleanse a process. And the process is easy to remember because we use the acronym of the name DAVE, DAVE, short for David, who slew Goliath with a very simple tool, right? It was a slingshot.
Yeah.
And that small man took down that giant, just like we people can take down those giant negative emotions using the tools of the mess cleanse. Again, back to Dave. Let me explain the process using the acronym. Dave is first. D, define the negative emotion
Yes.
as it relates. And I'm going to give you some examples as I do it, if that's okay.
For sure.
Okay, so let's define the negative emotion, and I'm going to say it's guilt. I feel very guilty about, and by the way, guilt, just to get into guilt a little bit, there are two types of guilt. There's self imposed, that which I put on myself, and there's outer imposed, that which someone else puts on me to make me feel guilty. I'm going to use a self imposed example of guilt. So, my mother, who passed way too young, I had promised her I was going to take her to Disney World. My mom never flew on an airplane in her life. And my mom passed never having had that trip and never having gotten on an airplane. And I, for years, wore myself out with self imposed guilt over that incident. So that's defining, that's the D in Dave. I just defined the emotion as it related to a person. And in this case, it was self imposed guilt, right? A in Dave is to address the specific situation and emotion, right? And I'll come back to that. The V, and this one's critical, is to validate the emotion. So I look
Okay.
at the emotion as it relates to a person or a circumstance of my life, and it could be fear, anger, guilt, any of them, and ask myself with some introspection, is this valid? Should I really be feeling guilty about this? And with my mother, I said to myself, honestly, yeah, I feel bad. I feel guilty that I never got to take that trip, right?
Definitely. Yes.
The E in Dave is erase that emotion. Now, let me explain. I said D is define, A is address, V is validate, because that's the critical step. Things are either valid or they're not. Your emotions are either valid or they're not. And this is where we got to get very honest with ourselves, like I did with my guilt. My guilt was valid to me about my mom. And then E, I erase it. Now, how do I erase it? I dive into this situation back to A, address it, and then I want to erase it. I realized that, hey, you know what, Neil? I said to myself, was I in control of that outcome? Was I genuinely going to take her to Disney World? Yes, I was. I absolutely was. Could I control the untimely death of my mother? Absolutely not. That was a shock to all of us. We didn't expect it, didn't see it coming, and I couldn't execute on my promise. So now what I finally went to do on the erase it side was to tell myself, look, you were fully intending to do that. You were stopped short by circumstances beyond your control, Larry, your mother's untimely passing. So, what I said was, you know what? I'm going to let this go and forgive myself of this self imposed guilt because it was truly beyond my control. So, I forgave myself, i.e., brought it to resolution and essentially erased that emotion. I don't think about that anymore. I don't stress over that anymore. That's just kind of one example of how we use the Dave model. And we use the Dave model on every single emotion, walking through that model. And trust me, when you introspect and get honest around things, whether it's anger at someone or with someone or someone angry with you or fear of flying, fear of dying, all of these things. And I'll give you another quick example on fear. I was fearful of flying. I had a really horrific
Oh,
flight
really? Wow.
many years ago, and I didn't think I was going to survive that flight. I literally, went through my life in my head because I thought we were going to die that day, literally. And that plane finally landed, and I said, I will never fly again. And I was about to quit a monster corporate job because I couldn't get on airplanes, and I was required to. Then I learned some things. Again, introspect. All right, address these. I validated it was real. I was no way I was getting on an airplane. Or you couldn't drag me on an airplane with a gun to my head. And then I decided, let me learn some things. How am I going to erase this fear? How am I going to get back in the air? Well, I realized that one of the things you can do with fear, well, of course, as Susan Jaffe says in the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, she says, if you'll embrace the thing that you fear and step right into it, the death of that fear is certain. I tried that. Okay. But here's what I did. I got some information. I learned. I said, let me talk to some people that, one, aren't afraid of flying and find out why they're not. Let me talk to pilots who fly these planes and learn. And what I learned, for example, was that I'm safer on an airplane than I am walking across my street,
Yeah.
you know?
Uh-huh.
So as you learn things and question things and talk to people that have a very differing opinion, okay, especially as it relates to fears. Last year I flew over 100,000 miles on American Airlines alone, just to put it simply. And I'll fly anything, anywhere, anytime now. That fear is completely gone using this process.
I mean, it's amazing to think about, but I want to draw an example myself. What about fear of not being able to pay your bills on time or not having enough money when you're an entrepreneur and at times it doesn't look as good as other times? How do you keep yourself from dealing with such stress based on that alone?
Well, again, I think you go through the process, right? You define specifically, and you just did what that fear is. You address that specific situation, which you did, talking about paying bills and fearful of being this entrepreneur. Validated, it's very real, right? So go to E, erase it. I think you've got to develop strategies then to say, how instead of fearing and harming myself physically, mentally, and emotionally over this fear, and it's valid. What can I do to bridge myself in the event that that happens? We have a game in fear we call under the mess cleanse. Play what if to the ridiculous. And what I mean by that is, so you just presented a situation. So you say, what if I can't pay my bills? Then what? Okay, so something's going to happen. Then if that happens, then what? And then what? And then what? And at the end, you're going to realize you're not going to die. All right.
Right.
So usually when you play what if to the ridiculous, you start laughing at at the folly of how severe your fear is. And then what you do is you take steps to learn. Again, What do I need to do? Okay, if I have to pay bills, then maybe what I need is a line of credit at a bank where if my income's going to stagger behind my outgo or my bills, I'm going to have to build a bridge between that. I'm going to create a relationship with a bank or a venture capital firm or somebody that's going to help me alleviate this fear and get on with. Because think about how much that fear consumes you as an entrepreneur,
Yes.
and probably stops you from taking next steps that'll bring
Certain
you more
risks.
income,
Yes.
that'll
Agree.
help further resolve the problem. You see what I mean?
Makes complete sense. Yes.
Because it becomes a vicious cycle. It depends on where you focus your time, on the fear or on resolving the fear. And nothing beats fear like education, talking to people, talking to experts in the particular area where you have the fear, or experts in the area that can resolve the fear. In your case, venture capital, partners, banks, lending institutions, whatever, that kind of thing. But there's always, Neil, and this is what I've learned. I don't care what the emotion is or how bad it feels, there is always an alternative. The process I'm giving us through the mess cleanse, the Dave process, forces us to take them through a cycle to get ourselves to a next step that's positive rather than the death spiral of the negativity and not coming out of that bad emotion.
So when you're talking about this, and this is again, you see the talk show host of me, the light bulb go on, and the teacher. Let's just say I was doing those things and I still feel fear, meaning I do go through those scenarios. I do erase those things. I do take the steps necessary to do that. And we're not talking finance. Let's just talk about anything. But yet you're not getting enough sleep. Okay. Let's talk about you're not working out enough. That could kill everything you're trying to do with the mess if you're not doing those, right? Those two things, if rest and working out.
Absolutely.
You could be mentally on the right track, but physically and emotionally with your brain not. Just kind of to let our listeners know, this is not the quick fix to everything. That you're not going to have any stress, because if you don't do those other things, that can be the domino effect of poor health too. Correct?
Absolutely. Listen, you said it a while ago. It's holistic. Mind, body are inseparable, and the two rely on each other. And again, it's chicken and egg. I don't care which one you put first, but you got to be dealing in both realms of the human. The body is designed to be moved. You have to move the body. Exercise, even if that's a walk every day. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in a gym. Throwing steel around. Just take a 30-minute walk or 20-minute walk or a 10-minute walk for starters. Just get the body going. And by the way, I will tell you, I'm a runner, and if people walk or run, the oxygenation that occurs to the body, I frequently will take a unresolved problem of mine out for a run with me and put it in my mind and say, I want a solution to this problem or multiple solutions. You would be amazed at how many times I come back with a variety. Sometimes I finally realized I could talk and record things into my phone. I would look for a pen and paper as I'm in the middle of a run, saying that's a great idea. It's amazing what the physical body will do to support the mind when the two are working in concert, and you're focused on a solution rather than focus on the problem, especially on the mental side. That's so damning.
That's so true.
And
Yeah.
problematic for us.
All right, so we're kind of going away from that point. You gave some specific examples of emotional situations and how to resolve them. We'll have to address one of those topics, Larry, on one episode. That's what's so great. I could just pinpoint, man, we didn't go deep enough. 30 minutes, we can go deep on any of this stuff. And that's really great. And again, that's fantastic. What about, so is forgiveness a powerful tool, isn't it?
Neil, it's we talk. Let me talk about anger. Let's talk about all these emotions, all these negative emotions of anger,
right.
fear, guilt. What I want the listeners to understand is that at a chemical level in the human body, and this will make the point. When you're angry, when you're in a height of anger and you're crying tears, you're so angry. Do you realize that the chemical composition of those tears is far different than if you were same person crying happy tears. The
That's
angry tears
crazy.
are literally
Wow.
chemically more toxic than the happy tears. So the whole chemistry of our body changes inside of the emotions that we harbor and hold on to. That's why it's so critical to get these resolved and push them aside. But forgiveness, as it comes under the issue of anger or guilt or any other emotion for that matter, but anger and guilt are two big ones. I'll give you an example. I had someone in my life who, I did something wrong and I shouldn't have done it. And I sought forgiveness from this person, and they were not going to forgive me. Period. End of story. And I held on to that for years. And finally, one day, as I learned more, like stuff like this mess cleanse and what's going on in my mind and my body because of this stuff, I asked myself a question. I said, how long do they want me to feel this way? For the rest of my life? And how long am I willing to feel this way? I've tried repeatedly to apologize. If I knew better, I would do better. I genuinely, fell on the sword and said, I am so sorry, please forgive me. Well, they wouldn't forgive me. So, you know what, Neil? I went in front of a mirror in the bathroom and I said to myself, I forgive you because you're not going to feel this way for the rest of your life. You made a mistake. Let it go. So forgiveness, and by the way, forgiveness is a selfish thing to do. I actually believe that forgiveness is a supreme act of selfishness. You don't forgive for the other person, you forgive for yourself. Because as long as you're not forgiving, you're holding on to something that is hurting you at every level, and particularly long enough, as we said, it's going to create a disease. Is it worth that
No.
to hold on to an
No.
emotion? Once you've gone through the Dave process and you validate it and you learn some things and figured out, look, I'm genuinely sorry. Whatever it is that you're learning about that emotion, you got to learn then ultimately to move past it,
All right.
move on.
For sure. And I think what we've been talking about a lot, I see, is you're talking about different ways that we deal with stress. But what is the stress cycle?
All the stress cycles back where I was saying to you, like some people, it's the chicken and the egg. People get caught up in the notion is I'm stressed, therefore uh, I'm angry. I'm stressed, therefore I'm fearful. Or flip it around. I'm fearful or I'm angry. Now I'm stressed. And that's the vicious cycle
Oh,
we get into.
jeez. Yeah.
But the bottom line is, Neil, it doesn't matter because no matter which is first, the stress or the emotion or the emotion or the stress, whichever's first, it's still toxic. It still has to be it still has to be cleansed and dealt with. As I said, remember, unexpressed emotion cannot die. So it lives inside of us and it literally kills us from the
Mhm.
inside out. When we harbor anger with another person and we don't go to resolve that through the Dave process, and when I say approach, to deal with this issue, I'm angry at somebody, I'm ultimately going to get with that person and have a conversation. And if they're a true friend and they really care about me, they're going to hear me. Even if we agree to disagree, at least I've expressed how I feel so I can let it go. And maybe they get a chance to express how they feel and I can better understand them. But we can even agree to disagree and then both let it go and stop letting it cause the ill effects that it is. See what I mean?
Right. One
Taking
thing.
everything to resolution is the key to the mess cleanse.
So the goal of this mess cleanse is to be healed in some way so that we can not deal with such suffering that could lead to such disease. And one
Absolutely.
thing that I wanted to talk about is explain the healing rooms exercise. Why is it very powerful?
Okay, Neil. So we talked about the primary emotions, disgust, anger, fear, and guilt. Now, I told you about the Dave process. First, define it, then address it, right? Define it, address it, validate it. Is it real? Is it not? And be honest with yourself, or otherwise it's not going to
Right.
help. And ultimately, erase it. So I'll leave this with the listeners because I think this, and I'm telling you, this is so powerful. If people want to take the steps of these rooms of healing exercise, what I say is that you first of all, get in a place that is your favorite chair or your favorite place. Maybe it's at the beach, maybe it's a nice recliner in your living room. Get your favorite beverage in your hand. Absolutely take out all distractions. And here's the healing rooms, real simple. Imagine yourself in, I call it the hallway of a hotel, and you're looking down a long hallway. And there are doors on the right and there are doors on the left. And at the end of that, there's one door at the very end of that hallway facing you. Okay? The first thing you're to do, and this is kind of a meditative exercise, so you're doing it all inside of your own mind. And by the way, this really brings the mess cleanse home because it starts to deal with those things in your specific life that are causing these negative emotions. So let me explain how this works. You go to the first door, and this is all in your mind, in your mind's eye. You walk in the door number one, and there's your mother or your father in that room, just standing in the middle of that room. You walk over to them. Say it's mom. You walk over to mom. You just look at her and notice what feelings come up inside of you. You'll notice things that start to occur, and generally it's going to be around issues that you have or have had, or things that aren't necessarily right. Don't judge any of it. Just let it well up inside you. And then you are to tell them in your own words how you feel about them. This could be positive or negative, depending on who you're standing in front of. And I'll give you a list in a moment. At least my list. People could swap out whoever they want on this list and put anybody they want in these rooms, right? So you're listening to what's coming up inside yourself. Then you're going to tell them how you feel about them and discuss any issues you have, good or bad, positive or negative. It's just a quiet discussion between you and them, right? And it's all inside your imagination. This exercise is profound, Neil, in how it works. So you tell them how you feel. Maybe it's a certain situation. Mom, I've never forgiven you for this, or I need your forgiveness for that. And then let them respond to you. Hear what they're saying back to you in your own mind's eye, right? If it's necessary, you ask them for forgiveness.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If it's necessary, you forgive them. And then as a final piece, you walk to them squarely, hug them, in this case, mom, whisper in her ear, I love you, mom. Now, we go back outside, and the remaining doors could be dad, a
Right.
sibling or multiple
Right.
siblings, your best friend, your worst enemy, teachers, bosses, co-workers, friends, so on and so forth. People should do this. This is the pure cleanse, this exercise, because it'll bring up every emotion, every issue, every problem with every person in their lives. And they get to stand there one-on-one and resolve it. And Neil, when they get to the last door, when they're done with everybody else in their lives, guess who's in the last door? You're going to walk into the door and you're going to see yourself.
Yeah.
And you're going to go through the same exercise. You're going to look at yourself and see what wells up inside of you. And you're going to talk to yourself. And you're going to listen to yourself about issues, about concerns you have with yourself. And you're going to ask for forgiveness from yourself, or you're going to give forgiveness to yourself. And then you're going to hug yourself and tell yourself, I love you, knowing that you're the best version of yourself you can be, and you're always trying, and you let it go. And Neil, I promise you, anybody that takes themselves through that exercise will have a profound experience on the other side, and their stress level related to negative emotions that we described in this program that relate to those people and those circumstances in their lives will lay down dramatically, causing them to be able to free themselves to live that happy, healthy life that we're designed to live. It's basically an exercise in unleashing yourself and giving yourself freedom in an honest and sincere way. But the power of this thing I cannot overstate. And one has to do it. That's why I said get in a very favorite place. And I don't care if it's the beach or the mountains or your living room. You know, get your favorite beverage, preferably not alcohol, at least not until you're done, because you'll feel like you want to celebrate
Yeah.
when you're done. And just walk yourself, take the time to go through this process.
That's
It
great.
will amaze you.
Awesome. Well, what a great episode. Best place we can find information on you is go to stackyourowndeck.com. You also can follow on all the different social media. Google Larry Bradley. He's going to come up everywhere. I appreciate you coming on, Larry, for another great episode of Stack Your Own Deck. And again, another place we can pick it up is VIPinternetradio.com. The radio show is available there as well as a bunch of different places. So, Larry, thanks for calling and look forward to next month's chat. Okay.
Hey, Neil, one more thing, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Can I offer again to the listeners
Yes.
a free copy of the free report we have? 10 ways to put your immune system on steroids without the steroids. All they need to do is email win@stackyourowndeck.com. Win@stackyourowndeck.com and put in the subject line free report, and we'll send them the free report.
All right, Larry. Great talking to you. Talk to you next month.
Thank you,
or
Neil.
sooner. Hopefully sooner. All right. Take care. Thanks again. Okay. Bye-bye. You're listening to Stack Your Own Deck, and we'll be back in just a moment.